1939. It was right after World War I. About 25% of the U.S. population was unemployed. Probably if you had a job, you were only making about $1 a day for like 16 hours of work. Mostly men had to work because, well, during the time women weren't seen as fit workers, and mostly people had to leave their houses and jobs and find work somewhere else. Mentally, probably they were distraught knowing that all their money was gone. Think about like Greece right now. All the banks just lost all their money for no apparent reason. And the fact that when you're making $1 a day, it's even though a dollar then was more than now, probably wasn't worth as much. Well, physically, they're probably living in their cars somewhere in a rustic area.
The Great Depression is the greatest, longest economic downturn in the Western industrialized world. The stock market crashed in October 1929, wiped out millions of investors. Consumers and investments dropped dramatically, causing the fall of industrial output and a huge number of unemployment since the failing company laid off workers. Until the World War II kicks in and gave American industry a bright turning point, America's economy remained horrible for 10 years. Over thousands of banks had to be suspended due to the failure. 30,000 companies went out of business, and more than 12 million people were unemployed. Average family income dropped from $2,300 to $1,600. Those without a job grew hungry. They either starved to death or joined the breadline to receive free food, or line up outside the soup kitchen, which is a charity set for poor people. Many lost their home because they couldn't pay for the mortgage or rental. Many homeless and unemployed workers began to wander around trying to find fortune. These people were referred to as hobos. These hobos would often sneak into open boxcars train to ride someplace else, hoping to find a better life. Many others, such as farmers who lost their land, have to pack up and move west to California. There, either they find a good life or live alongside of the road as homeless.
In the South, you have African Americans who are moving north, in part because of the Great Depression. You have tremendous drop in farm prices, so that accelerates the Great Migration. In the North, you have a sense that the government needs to do something more. That the cycles of booms and busts that we had dating back to the 1870s was not good for anyone, and that the government needed to intervene and do something about that. And so then we have a much more active Federal Reserve, we have a much more active government in terms of stimulus. In the South, you have the government stepping in and basically spreading electrification and developing infrastructure. In the South before the 1930s was completely backward, like living in the 18th century or something. So the Great Depression had a tremendous influence because it led to the New Deal, which led to the development of the South into a modern economy. In the North, you have the interest in socialism, you have strengthening of labor unions, you have Social Security and social welfare, and the idea that the government is supposed to step in and help people during times of need. It's a tremendous change, in the way that we ran our economy and the people's relationship to the government.
The Great Depression had a very large impact on the characters in the story of Mice and Men, mainly due to the economic failure that led to the change of moral values in society. The moral values in the story would have been very different if the story hadn't taken place during the Depression era. Lenny would have been put into a mental hospital because of his disability, but unfortunately, the economy was so bad that the morality of the people were distorted and people just believed that Lenny was crazy and dumb. It was even shown in the story that the murder of Lenny left no consequences for George, whereas if this story were to happen before or after the Depression, George would have been imprisoned. People have seen the murder as part of life, and that's something they must do. When people are put in a situation where they could not even afford food to eat, their natural instincts is to first survive, and if it means that killing others and abandoning families would allow one to have a chance to live an extra day, they would do it. Another impact the Great Depression had on the characters were bond. It is highly unlikely that Slim, Candy, and George would befriend crooks, mainly because of their racial differences and the fact that racial discrimination and segregation still occurred during that time. They all still got together and shared a bond because they were all stuck in the same situation as everybody else in America. In general, the way that the characters act and how they were treated were caused by the distorted moral values in society, which changed the whole aspect of what's right and wrong during the Depression era. The story would have been entirely different if the setting was at another time and place. Steinbeck's work really left an imprint on the characters in Of Mice and Men, especially when he used the setting to digress from the characters' differences and form an incredible bond of all characters who felt the same pressure of the Great Depression bearing down on them.
Well, since George and Lenny went to like a rural area to work and like on a farm, if it wasn't for the Great Depression, I don't think they would have gone there because George is a smart guy. I think he would have probably stayed in the city with Lenny to work because he tried to keep a tighter leash on Lenny. But other than that, most of the characters there don't know like what it's like to earn money. Like, only probably like Candy would know what it's like since he was old enough to know what it was like before the Depression.
Let's see. I know a couple things about the Great Depression. I was really bad in American history. I know that it took place in the 20s and 30s. And there were a lot of people that were extremely poor, and because of that, people were forced to do difficult things. Families really struggled to survive, and during that time, though, there were also some people that were living really, really lavishly and opulently. I think it really, really had a negative impact on the working class people. And I think that even when they were trying to make ends meet and live off the fat of the land, as Lenny would say, there were things like the climate and other obstacles as far as the weather goes that made it really difficult for them to survive. So even like they could rely on farming, things like the Dust Bowl that happened really made things difficult. I think if times were different, George and Lenny wouldn't have had to become migrant workers. They might have been able to be more educated. They wouldn't have to be so desperate in finding jobs. Maybe there would be more resources for Lenny to help him out. But because everything was so difficult and money was at such a low, I think people had to do things that maybe they wouldn't usually do.